Hey monsters, thanks for tuning in to Murder News, your source for the latest breaking true crime news. We've decided to take a break from our usual true crime news coverage to help pay tribute to the Black Lives Matter movement. We have spent a lot of time this week reflecting on what we can do to support the uprising, and we would like to thank the Black community for spending so much time and emotional labor letting us know what we can do to help. It shouldn't be your job, but we're here to listen. I'm embarrassed to say how little I knew about the history of police brutality against the Black community beyond the recent murders. It's definitely the responsibility of white people to understand that police brutality is not new, and the fear of being murdered by a police officer is a very real threat to the Black community every day. So today we will provide some background on the history of police brutality in the U.S. and provide some ideas for ways you can help fight for social justice and support the Black Lives Matter campaign, as well as Black-owned businesses.
Murder. We want to start by giving some background on the history of police brutality against the Black community in the U.S., and also acknowledge how challenging it is to find accurate information on some of these subjects because, as the Fruit Loops podcast likes to say, the media is racist. We're going to give you a brief summary, but there is so much more to it. If you are white, please take the time to listen to the personal stories going around and see how many people's lives are deeply affected by this very real systemic racism and what you can do to help. We have linked to all of our sources in the details down below, so please check those out. We've linked to several Black teachers, TV show hosts, and writers, and even included an interview with Oprah. We've also included books to read by Black authors to take a deeper dive. The history of police brutality starts before the Civil War, when slave patrols were used to police slaves, particularly by catching runaway slaves. After the abolition of slavery, African Americans were intentionally punished for small infractions that would otherwise have been considered trivial had they been committed by whites. Policing was used as a way of maintaining a social hierarchy for white people. Police officers were often also members of white supremacist groups like the KKK, which was officially founded in 1869.
From the years 1916 to 1970, the Great Migration began. During this time, over 6 million African Americans moved from the rural South to the North and largely the Midwest. The reason for this huge migration was the beginning of the Industrial Revolution and the financial opportunities that opened up as a result, and also because the incredibly harsh Jim Crow laws. The need for industrial workers opened the door to migration, and the less brutal treatment in the North was also a big factor. Lynching was also still common in the South, and while racism was clearly still an issue in the North, there were more opportunities for liberation. In effect, police brutality replaced lynchings as a means of oppressing African Americans.
Police brutality against the Black community had become a serious problem in many areas by the mid-1900s, but these stories were largely unreported by the white media. The first case of police brutality to get media attention was the Watts Rebellion. On August 11, 1965, a police officer pulled over two brothers, Marquette and Ronald Fry. A crowd gathered to watch as officers questioned the men, and their mother walked over to see what was happening. A struggle ensued, and the police beat both of the brothers and arrested them along with their mother. Onlookers started throwing rocks at the police cars and eventually at passing cars. A rebellion broke out in the Watts neighborhood of Los Angeles, spurred by the upset over the beating of the Fry brothers, along with dissatisfaction with high unemployment, inadequate schools, and poor housing in LA. The rebellion lasted for 6 days, with 34 people being killed, over 1,000 injured, and 4,000 arrested. Little was done by the government to improve the lives of the Black community after the rebellion.
What's known as the Detroit Riot of 1967 began when a group of people gathered at an illegal after-hours nightclub to celebrate the homecoming of two soldiers from the Vietnam War. The police raided the bar and arrested 82 people. A protest broke out, and the police responded by blockading the surrounding neighborhood. The outraged community drove through the blockade. The protests and violence spread to other areas of the city as police lost control of the situation. The National Guard was called in along with the state and Detroit police. Fires were set and the uprising continued for 5 days. 300 to 400 families lost their homes, and insurance companies refused to pay out the claims. Little was done to rebuild the communities that were destroyed.
For years, MOVE, the Philadelphia-based group that combined values of Black liberation and environmentalism, clashed with the local police. In 1985, this culminated in a string of arrest warrants for offenses ranging from rioting to disorderly conduct, which resulted in a standoff in West Philadelphia, their largely African-American residential neighborhood. Next, police officer Frank Powell dropped a bomb on the MOVE residence, killing 6 adults and 5 children. The neighborhood caught fire, and Police Commissioner George Samber decided to let it burn. 60 homes burned to the ground, leaving 250 residents homeless and destitute. On March 3, 1991, Rodney King was pulled over for speeding in Los Angeles, and once pulled over, he fled on foot. The police then caught Rodney, and 15 police officers beat and kicked Rodney, not knowing that a witness was recording the beating. Rodney was nearly beaten to death. 4 of the officers were charged with assault and use of excessive force. The officers were acquitted of charges, and within hours, a riot broke out in Los Angeles. The riots resulted in 63 deaths and almost 3,000 injuries in Los Angeles, and there were protests in cities all over the world.
On August 9, 2014, in Ferguson, Missouri, a police officer shot 18-year-old Michael Brown after questioning him about a robbery at a convenience store. Michael struggled with the police officer and fled, and the officer pursued and shot him. On August 10th, a peaceful memorial was held for Michael, and 150 police and riot gear showed up. A rebellion began as police officers at times fired tear gas and rubber bullets at the lines of protesters and reporters. The Black Lives Matter movement officially started in 2013 after the shooting of Trayvon Martin, but the Ferguson Rebellion brought the much-needed campaign into the national spotlight.
These individual cases barely scratch the surface of violence against the Black community by police, but we are highlighting them because they led to rebellions. Between 2013 and 2019, police in the United States killed 7,666 people, according to data compiled by Mapping Police Violence, a research and advocacy group. There were only 27 days out of 365 in 2019 that the police did not kill someone. The number of police killings in the U.S. disproportionately affects the Black community. Despite only making up 13% of the U.S. population, Black Americans are 2.5 times as likely as white Americans to be killed by the police. Of these killings, 99% of the officers involved have not been charged with a crime.
So what do we do next? We have some suggestions of anti-racist actions you can take, but we would love to hear from you suggestions of things you can do, organizations that need donations, and Black businesses to support in the comments below. We can and should attend protests if you're able. Please do not attend if you have any symptoms, and wear a mask even if you're feeling healthy. White people, it is very important that you are on your best behavior at protests. Do not give the police or the media any reason to think the protests are out of hand. It's okay if you're not able to attend any protests, and another wonderful thing you can do, if you can afford, is donate to the Black Lives Matter campaign, and especially your local chapter. Other great places to donate are George Floyd's GoFundMe, Campaign Zero, Reclaim the Block, plus your local bail funds to help bail out protesters. And don't stop paying attention after the media stops reporting on George Floyd's death and the protests. Keep going, keep participating, keep voting.
Some inexpensive to free things you can do are read books by Black authors that give a more detailed history of racism and how to end it. A personal favorite is Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. And we also recommend How to Be Anti-Racist, Just Mercy, and White Fragility. We are including a longer list in the details below. Talk to your children about what is happening. They're not learning about this in school. Teach them about privilege, what it is, and how they can use theirs to help people of color. You can also think through where you are already spending your money and make an effort to shop at Black-owned businesses instead wherever possible. So many of us are still on lockdown and ordering food in right now, and there are also many fantastic lists about Black-owned restaurants floating around on social media.
Let's bring this back to true crime for a minute, because we would love to share some extraordinary true crime podcasts by people of color. We want to hear your favorites in the comments below as well. Our personal favorites are Affirmative Murder, Scam Goddess, Murder History Girls, Once Upon a Crime, 90s Crime Time, Bruh is a Murder, Handcuffed, Crime Noir, Undercover Coven, Fruit Loops, Serial Colors of Color, and Blood and Firewater. They are all fantastic, many we have already had on our show, and we're including links to their social media down below. Subscribe to their shows, follow them on social media, and join their Patreons if you're able.
We also have a great appreciation for Murderino makers, and we have a few favorite creators of color to share with you this week. Pixel and Ink Creative makes the cutest shirts, cups, prints, and more, many of them with a true crime theme. Raven and Unicorn makes cards and gifts, many with dark, murdery humor. Dearest Drawings is an artist who does pet portrait commissions. Thanks so much for tuning in to This Week in True Crime with MurderMurder News. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button below, give us a thumbs up, and tell all of your true crime friends.
If you need more of our true crime fix, join our commune at murdermurder.news for our monster book club and cold case solving groups. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. See you next week.